back. If you're joining me again, glad to have you all here. I'm going to do a little weekly energy reading, and I'm going to use 3 different decks. I kind of came up with a way to create a reading and add different layers through using these different decks. So I've been doing that for myself personally, and Spirit said today I'm going to go out and share that with some other people. So I'm ready to share that here. I have the Modern Witch Tarot deck. This is by Lisa Sterl. It's one of my favorite decks. I use that one all the time. I'm on mirror camera, so everything's probably backwards. Sorry about that. Luminous Spirit Tarot deck. This is the Prism edition that you can see there, like all the backs of these cards. I can show you. The backs of these cards are like prismy, holographic, sheen, shiny, hand illustrated by Tina Gong is that deck. And then I have this deck here, the Chakra Reading Cards by Rochelle Charman. And I picked up this chakra card deck out of a few of them on Amazon. It's something special. I'll read that first. But I think that's what I'm going to start off the reading with for this week. And so we're going to get right into it. And I'm trying to decide how I'm going to do this, because I think I'm going to do just one general collective reading, just to keep my time managed. So we'll start out with chakra cards for the week. So get grounded here for a minute. Y'all are welcome to start focusing on your breath. That can mean closing your eyes or keeping your eyes open. Some people like to focus in one spot, whether that's straight ahead or down a little ways, whatever makes it easiest for you to relax the most. It's a great place to start this. I shuffled here, but I'm going to put you off for a moment here. I'll get my little bell. Which that helps. Let's take 3 deep breaths in together, and take them at your own pace. Take them in whatever way really helps you feel connected from your thoughts, connected to like your body, whether that's narrating or counting or a box breath or something in particular, like giving direction. Whatever way helps you connect your mind and your body the most. Perfection doesn't have to be. Discernment and determination to understand and use these messages for the highest benefit of all beings. So shuffle them awkwardly. So Spirit, we're looking for 1 or 2 cards that will tell us about the reading that we're doing today. Oh, what was it? I forgot. No. Was our major concern, like what's our biggest concern for the week? So what can you tell us about how to best care for our chakras, or how to what to be most aware of as we go into this next week? This is a timeless video, so this can be listened to anytime. But currently I'm recording this. Today is December 4th, I believe. It's a Sunday. I like to do things on Sundays. I should probably do things. Something makes easier about that. It's more accessible, less energy. So we got 21, the card communication, and I have to remember, I think that's probably a third eye. It looks like a third eye chakra. And then number 20 is play. Probably heart chakra. Right, close to each other. Oh, so maybe throat chakra. Interesting. Makes sense though. There we go. So bring more play into the world. That's what we're doing at this time. You know, joy, noticing the magic in the universe, freedom, those things that remind us of being like a child. And so the things, because you know, when you were a kid, like everything could play. You could play house, you could play going to work, and it was different than going to work. Like I used to play restaurant. So how can we incorporate like play into what we're doing? That makes it more fun. Even if it is going to work, running errands and doing things like that, how can we incorporate play into our day-to-day commitments? Because those things may be causing us a lot of stress, but the more we can add play into those elements and make little games out of it in some way, that's actually enjoyable and rewarding to us. Like it's not something that can obviously just be there as a game to appease us for the sake of having a game involved. You know, people sometimes will say, oh, I set my timer and I race myself, and I'm like, I'm not competitive in that way. That may work for some other people, and there's no judgment on that, but it doesn't work for me because I'm not competitive, and I don't enjoy competition in that particular way, where it's me competing with myself against a timer to see if I can unload the dishwasher in this amount of time. But I can use that kind of same framework in other regards too. So, you know, to each their own. And just this is just a reminder that, especially this time of year, things just get really we get into this is what I have to be doing. I should be going to see my family. I have to go and gift shop, and I have to blah, 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 and I have to get a gift for everybody, so therefore I have to go to the cheapest place to get those gifts. And so we get stuck into these like routines of what we tell ourselves about how things have to do, or that like we push ourselves into too much pressure. Oh, I have to buy all of my gifts locally. Well, maybe buy your most expensive gifts locally, and then some of your, you know, less expensive gifts that you're getting for, you know, things, some of those things, make them a way that's affordable to you, so that you're not having to, you know, it's a compromise. You're not having to sacrifice everything across the board and say, oh, well, like everybody's only getting, you know, I'm only going to buy gifts for 4 people because that's all I have money for if I buy everything local. Where you could buy 2 of those gifts local, and then you have money for 4 more gifts or something. You know, if you got 6 kids, or if you have 6 people that you love that you want to give gifts to, and it's going to take a mixture of, you know, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly the way that maybe you would set out in your mind that, you know, you would not buy anything that was brand new this year. You were going to buy everything secondhand, and then all of a sudden you get to this part and you're like, oh crap, I don't have a gift for this person. I have to, you know, do this the other way. How can you be more like playful in that respect too? To allow yourself to not make a mistake, but to not be perfect. To say, I tried. The game was to get as close to perfect as possible. And if I can get to perfect, that's great. But also if I don't get to perfect, I'm not going to sit here and beat myself up, because look how far I came, look how much I did, look at what I was able to accomplish, and how can I still like keep that lightheartedness that comes with play too. I think that's an important part. And this is part of that heart chakra. I didn't mention that. This is heart chakra and this is throat chakra. So this is definitely about like, what closes off the heart chakra are things like grief and sorrow, and that's not to say that we shouldn't experience those things. Sometimes we need to we have to experience those things and let them move through us, and grief moves through more than just our heart chakra, but it's just a matter of how can we make sure that if it closes, it opens again. It's a lotus flower, you know, if it's closing because it's got to conserve its energy, how can we make sure that we, you know, coax it back open? How can we make sure that we introduce that element of play back in there as it becomes comfortable? sure possibly we're going through a stressful time or a time of grief, or possibly both. With holidays, a lot of times people have those memories of people who are no longer with us, the loss, and even rejection and abandonment and things of that nature can all show up. And this is just, how can you, on a personal level, even with yourself, add in more play so that you're able to enjoy these little things of life, even in the day-to-day stuff. So, like, when you take your dog to the park, play with your dog. And it's so funny, like, little things like that, like, can you play peekaboo with your dog? Can you, things like that. So it just helps you connect to yourself, to, like, joy, to, like, this deep part of yourself that, some people call their inner child. You can refer to as many things. Anyways, that's the advice for this week, is to start with play. Keep that in mind. And the very next card, it's about the throat chakra and communication. It says this is an important time for communication, and it may be easy to, like, hold back or alter your words so that you can possibly protect someone else's feelings, or like a fear of rejection. Like, if you say the truthful way of it, or you say the whole picture or the whole story, then of course, like, they won't understand, or they won't see you the same way, or they won't agree with you, or whatever. And so this can, the temptation that we can enter into can then lead us to conflict. So this isn't to say that the conflict is coming. This is to say that now more than ever, and I've heard this as some things coming up about Mercury is in Sagittarius right now. I'm pretty sure, and there's some things going on with the full moon coming up next week. So this is a time to clear your throat chakra. Take this time, because what you're doing whenever you're communicating clearly and honestly, and in a way that you're not, like, obviously you don't want to say things like brash. You don't want to say things like you're being like this or whatever, or telling people what's wrong with them, or there's so many ways that we can have conflict arise in all kinds of different relationships, and then how we can use communication to either hinder that relationship connection. Like, that's the thing that's happening whenever conflict happens. There is, there's value differences happening. So, like, what was that? It's the Lover's card that comes to mind for me with that one. So it's like these values differences, and we get to this panic sometimes where, like, the relationship's gonna end, or I have to end this relationship because of this. And those are valid, and to each their own, and how you process those thoughts. I've had both scenarios many times in different ways, and sometimes that panic is just from a past pattern, like that, because the last time I was in a situation where this was a conflict, this was a values conflict, it led to something like this happening. And I have to step back and look at that sometimes and say, is that really, like, am I being fair to this connection right here? And that's what this is saying, is that communication is how we continue connection, build community. Those words are all, like, connection is not in there, but, like, community, communication. You can't have a really strong community that isn't willing to communicate with each other, even whenever they don't like what the other person is saying. And obviously that comes with boundaries and an expectation of there to be respectfulness and to not dehumanize people with language and things like that. But also, like, just because something feels threatening in communication doesn't mean it's automatically threatening, but we do have to honor that still in ourselves. And that can be, that throat chakra can be tied to that, like, did we get to express ourselves whenever we were young? Whenever we were children growing up in the world, was it safe for us to express clearly our needs, our desires, and our dreams? and when we disagreed with people, when we agreed with people, our opinions, all of those things. And so we're all in that time space still where we're all able, to be thrown back into that time space here, which is what's interesting about this image to me, is that like we can really be communicating on a mental to mental level with somebody, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing. I've had many instances where it's like no one is putting their heart in it, like we're both stuck in our past patterns, and you're arguing with your mother and I'm arguing with my mother, and we're projecting that through ourselves to each other, and deflecting and projecting onto each other, like with another person in this same kind of context. I've been there recently, not recently, but in the last few years, and it's just so interesting that communication ties to so much, because that's the interesting thing about the chakras. And I'm not an expert. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. I'm not going to, that's a lot to kind of go into anyways. But what I do understand is that the throat chakra, so the middle chakras, which would be the throat and the heart, and so the heart is considered an upper chakra, the throat is considered an upper chakra, the heart is the threshold to the upper chakras. Like I said, this is my understanding. And so in order to have the throat chakra activated, we have to have the heart chakra activated. So these two are interdependent messages that we have to be more playful in our communication. We have to incorporate an understanding of how conflict is a creative energy as well as a chaotic energy. Yes, of course, it can send things out in a million different directions, but can bring us together closer than ever, with more together to build together whatever world that we're kind of creating. I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but so this is not just like incorporate play for yourself and communicate better with other people, just watch yourself. That's not necessarily it. This is also going to be that there's going to be a time when we are going to feel like we're really pressured in communication, and how can we ease up on the pressure that we put on ourselves, that we put on our communications, that we put on our connections with people that we really care about, our relationships that require us to have really, not the surface level friendships and the coworkers and things like that, but the connections that require deep communication, good communication on a long-term basis. Like, how can we introduce more play into those? And that's what we're going to be going over this week. So, glad to get started. I'm going to keep those two cards out because I'll forget what I drew. Start with the Luminous Spirit Tarot. The Luminous Spirit Tarot. What was this one? With the holographic. That's what they say. Holographic. Okay. Prism. I don't know where I keep getting that word. Holographic. I don't know. I'm not sure I know what that word means. We're starting off the tarot with Spirit. We want to know what is the biggest concern facing us this week. I was going to say, they might give us multiple cards. They give me Page of Pentacles and the World Reversed. I don't know if there's an app for this. Oh well, I'll just wing it. They have their app, which you can get. You can use these cards digitally without purchasing a deck. I understand. I have a little bit of trouble with the app myself, but I do really like it. It is Luminous Spirit Tarot, or Luminous Spirit, in the App Store. I know that this is on iPhone. I don't know that it's on other phone Play Store, things like that. But it's, interesting. So we're having to be more practical, and that may mean trusting people more. And that's something I've been talking to people about this like all year long. And I'm going to show these cards. The Page of Pentacles, this is where I'm starting with reading, is that like this is that call to be practical, and then the World inverted. So the Page of Pentacles to me says like because my question was, what is our greatest like concern for the next week or so? I think that was my question exactly. I have it written down here, sorry. Yeah, our concern for the next week. So, and look, this is like on their mind. You can see it like just sitting there weighing on their mind. They're like, I have to be so practical. I cannot mess up. I cannot take my mind off of money. I cannot keep thinking about dates or ice cream, whatever it is, like whatever I'm like spending my money on. Maybe that is a waste of my money, or is like a place where my money is being like sucked into, is what I'm trying to think of a better term for that, but I'm not thinking of one. But to have like but also to keep in mind that we're not being like stingy, we're being practical. If we need something and we have the money to pay for it, then we need to get it. If it's like, even if it's like lunch, like we're out here, we're stuck, we need food, like we shouldn't be making ourselves starve in order to save. But taking a practical approach, if you've got more than one reason for why you're not eating lunch there and you're going to do it later, whatever. But also being willing to trust like the process. When I think of this, I'm thinking of like the growth process, because Pentacles represents like the earth itself, our bodies, anything solid and physical. And if we're like manifesting, if we're growing ourselves, if we're trying to have a better growth mindset, moving from a scarcity mindset to a more growth and abundant mindset, then this is just a stage of that, of being willing to trust that it's going to be difficult, possibly. And that's what I'm seeing here too with the World upside down, is like the World, let's see what I have for that, like, yeah, the World upside down is kind of like we're resisting integration, or like we're nearing that point. I think that's really more, we're getting near to the end of like where we've been learning about something, especially like where we've been learning to be more playful with our communication. So we're getting to the end of this learning process where we're going to have to integrate all that knowledge of what we've done, of what we've been practicing, of what we've been understanding. And it's possibly about things that have been painful, have been difficult, like hardships, and have weighed on us. But also that, like, I can speak from my personal experience, like losing people that we weren't prepared to lose this year may have been difficult, or having to walk away from things that we didn't feel like we really had like the support to walk away from, but we had to walk away from them because they weren't practical. They weren't going to keep us in alignment with our path of being able to have a stable foundation for ourselves. And so that has been like a difficult thing kind of all through this year, is in this World. The World is the last card in the major arcana, and it being inverted is just saying like, where you're so close. This isn't to say that something's wrong, but this is that last step kind of that we're taking, and focusing on the more practical matters. That it may not be that we go out into the world and make all of the friends. We may not become a two-headed being, which to me also talks about like relationships. I see a lot of talk, and I'm generalizing because who do I talk to, but people that I bump into. But I think it's interesting that marriage seems to be like less heteronormative, first of all, but also like polyamory is picking up, and all of these other ways that are like non-monogamous. And I think it's so interesting, and just even people who are still in heteronormative relationships, even not getting married, like not coupling up forever and making commitments, you know. Those are interesting things that have been on the table, have been talked about a lot this year, is how much people do or do not value marriage. And I think that's interesting because it may not be that we're going out into the world the same that we thought we were. Maybe we've known for a long time that we were not meant to go out into the world. You know, that rings true for me personally, that like I knew that I want to be a part of a community, but I have really little desire to be a part of a unit that is two people, you know, and going through the traditional escalator of going, you know, dating and moving in together and then getting married and all of those things. That definitely never really aligned with me personally. And I think that it's to each their own how they do it. I'm solo polyamorous, and but I don't know how to explain all of that. I don't date a lot, but that's as personal as I'll get there. But I just think that we're all kind of going through these stages where we're coming to the end of realizing that the way that we thought we were going to go out into the world or enter out into the world, or perhaps it's changed, perhaps it's gone between this like fantasy of what we want to happen. We want to get married. If we found the right person, it would be perfect. And that other way of like, oh, well, I already gave up on that dream. Nobody showed up. Like, I was waiting for such and such charming, and they never came. And so I charmed myself, and if you want to like hang out and get a milkshake or something, that's cool. But otherwise, I'm just gonna keep doing my thing. And I think that's kind of the era that we're in, is that like it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world if we don't end up in a partnership. As a Libra, I feel like that's like a really big accomplishment to be able to say that. Libra moon. And I'm just like, that's definitely been a big theme for me this year, is being willing to not be, even in, not like to say that like, even within polyamory that happens, that people will partner up and like click up, but like when you end up at a party and everybody ends up in pairs, you know, and things like that, like, and people will maybe mingle between different pairs, but they kind of stick to their same like things. So anyways, that's kind of the idea I'm getting here, is that people are maybe like understanding that like that pairing up is still like part of this that's part of the story that we're dealing with right now, is this like, how can we be more practical about moving through the world like as a page rather than as, you know, a two-headed worldly interesting being. Extra arms would be nice. Such an interesting thing. So dealing with integration of our lessons for this year. I'm not a big fan of that like lesson of being like how are you gonna plan for the next year. I'm really like, I do like spending this time from now through the winter solstice, which is like the 21st in December. I like to spend that time really thinking about how can we like review on what we have done and really just like congratulate ourselves, kind of celebrate that stuff. I think that's really what this month is about, because it's like, it's not an easy time, and anyone else is gonna probably have something to say about what we have or have not accomplished. You know, like we all sit down sometimes with somebody at this time of the year. You may find yourself on a phone call or sitting down on a Zoom call or you know, at a dinner or whatever, with friends and family, and they're asking you, what have you been up to this year? And we're like, oh, I've got to come up with a list of accomplishments of things, and you know, or if you're dating, or you know, whatever is on your plate at this time. That's just one of those interesting things that tends to come up. What have you been up to this year at this time of the year? What people like to talk about the year in review. So, Spirit, get to know what is blocking us. What's our blockage? With our major concern, what is standing in our way? Blockage is particular. It's not an obstacle. This is not to be overcome. This is something that we just have to move around, deal with. Move around sounds like an obstacle, but it's something that we just have to adjust to, adapt to. A blockage is, or wait for it to go away, you know, and that could be definitely what this full moon is about for you, is about releasing something. And this says Eight of Swords is what came out. What's blocking us? Eight of Swords inverted, which is like self-limiting beliefs that imprison us. So the most iconic image of this one here is in, there's another deck that has, like, this is closer to the Rider-Waite Smith, Pamela Smith deck. I call it the Rider-Waite deck. But Eight of Swords typically is like a circle of swords, and so whenever the card's upright, they're all the swords are down in the ground, and then as you turn it the other way, all the swords would essentially fall out. And I always like that interpretation of like looking at a card upside down. When it comes out inverted, can we look at it upside down and see if it changes the meaning? Just by the picture, the swords would no longer be stuck in the ground. You know, essentially here, they're flying around a butterfly. All of them, they would just fall down. You know, 8 is about regeneration. The butterfly also mimics that imagery, mimics that symbolism of regeneration, of like self-mastery, for lack of a better word. I can't believe that we don't really have a good word. I think the exchanges for that in the English language right now, and I mean, if you can think of one, please share it with me. I'd love to know, because it's about this, like, and then this mastery has to do with, this self-mastery has to do with our thoughts and our inner dialogue. So it's not just like having negative thoughts and turning those off and being like, that's not true. Yeah, you know, it's not shooting down negative thoughts necessarily. It's more about getting to the root. What is creating a negative thought? If you consistently apply for jobs and then you walk into it in the job interview and you don't maybe put your best foot forward because maybe you, you know, this, that, and the other went wrong. Okay, well, have you gone back after you went through a bad job interview? What is your process of reviewing what went wrong in that process, so that you can make sure that doesn't happen again? Do you have a process where you do that? That's one way that you can, you know, go back, and that's that regeneration, is kind of going back over. So what self-limiting beliefs maybe show up that tell you that you have to stay up late looking up information about the company, you got to get extra prepared, you got to watch all these YouTube videos, and blah, 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 blah. And I love that, so I will share this with you. This is my favorite thing from, I think it was straight from Thich Nhat Hanh. No, it had to be a student of Thich Nhat Hanh's. It was a nun, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, was giving a speech and talking about how they were like, you know, I spent so much time the first couple of times that I was talking, and I think they were talking about talking to Thich Nhat Hanh, and they were discussing like how like that they would try to study before they had like a speech. They were giving like a Dharma talk, and so like they were like, I wanted to make sure I had enough information, so I was like reading over things, and then the one thing that got talked about was something I didn't have on my mind, and they were like, they talked to Thich Nhat Hanh and they got this advice to I try not to think, it was what his like feedback was like, I try not to think about anything when I have something going on that day, when I have a Dharma talk or whatever's going on. It's like, I want to go the whole day without thinking if I can. And I think he was talking about maybe even in his normal days. And obviously this man is a monk. It's a very different situation, and I think it's important to always like highlight that we are, we would be called household practitioners. We're not expected to practice in any capacity like what monks do all the time. Now, does that mean that if you have a weekend off to yourself that it's not beneficial to meditate like a monk and to organize your day like that and to be very intentional and mindful in every way? And can you not benefit it from it? No, it's extremely beneficial, but it's just not required for us to do it and to do it in the same exact way. Because if you watched even, you know, one ceremony of how the chanting and all of the and people coming in and walking through like the daily routine in a monastery or anything like that is very different than life at home. But you can be inspired, and I think that's a great thing to think about. And that being said, that there's scientific proof, you can check me on this on Google, but there's scientific proof that says that the structure of the monastery is what helps not prevent, but curb the intensity of depression and mental illness issues. And I don't know that there's proof that there's no issue, because that's not true. People come into monasteries in all kinds of conditions and with all kinds of afflictions and wounds, internal and external, like soul wounds and things like that. So it's just a very it's something to think about, that if we have more structure in our days, and can we question these self-limiting beliefs that come up, and if that's something that you want to talk about, I would highly recommend a reading for that if you have self-limiting beliefs that you want to get into, because that's something that I am really interested in helping people work with, but it's something that's very specific to each person, and so it can be it's something that's really hard to talk about in a really general way for me, because self-limiting beliefs are the things that stop us from doing things that we want to do, and talking yourself out of it. I don't like this or that about it. I've had jobs that I've talked myself out of, and I've said, because of the hours or because of this or that, I've had to talk myself out of it. I really wanted the job. I really wish that I could, feel like I was competent enough. And there's times where I don't know. Half the time I don't know if I'm not competent enough, or if it's that, they really wouldn't accommodate. They want somebody who's going to work 40 hours a week. Well, what if I can do the same amount of work in 20 hours? I can try to pitch that idea, but when it comes down to it, I don't trust, because I have that limiting belief that there isn't enough, the world isn't that kind and that nice most of the time. So I don't think that's necessarily always true, but you never know if you don't try it. That's what people are always saying, right? You have to try to test those limits. And that's what I see here too, is that they've put these self-restrictions on this card. It's self-restriction, self-limitations. If we can remove those and at least try, who knows if somebody will say yes. Somebody might be stupid enough to take us up on that idea. Pardon me. I need some water. Thank you, Spirit. Will you tell us, what advice do you have for us? Yeah. What advice do you have for us in dealing with integration and practical thinking and self-limiting beliefs? There we go. High Priestess. So we have the keys within us. It's going to be going inside, looking in, deep, dark, facing our fears. Okay, you guys can't see it if I don't put it up here. So they've got a moon behind them. They've got a snake there in their arm, kind of wrapped around their shoulders and stuff. And so it's something to think about, fears, and how do we deal with how our fears, especially our fears that relate to our desires. Anything that we desire greatly is going to have more and more fear show up around it, because we're really afraid of not getting it. We're afraid of getting it. We're afraid of not getting it. We're afraid of what has to change about us in order for us to get there. There's a lot of things that come up around desire and dreams and fear. And at this time of the year, whenever we're reviewing on what we've done, what we've accomplished, and what we want to possibly accomplish for the next year, where we see ourselves in the future, this is a time for me where I like to try to plan out 3 to 5 years in the future on goals, even if it's just writing and journaling. It helps me a lot, and something about this time of the year helps me be able to tap into that as we move through this, as we're moving through the seasons, as we're moving through the astrological calendar from Aries to back around, back to the astrological new year. We're essentially going through a development process. It's akin to each stage, Aries through 1 through whatever, 12, they're the growth stages of a child or whatever. And so I like to think of it as we're constantly going through that growth stage from one month to the next, to the, and everybody's is different, of course, but this is about like really seeing that we have this ability to manage our stress and our fears and our nervous system, because like obviously this high priestess is the major arcana. This is after all the minor arcanas and things, so this is essentially like, what would it be? It would be the two. Yeah, this would be the four queens all together. Would be the Empress. Sometimes people think that too, or the High Priestess. I think it's kind of, some people say different. Each queen has a different like major arcana correspondent. So I'm trying to think. Sorry, but I just think this is more about like facing our fears and being willing to like understand that like we get kind of told this idea about how like the things that bring fear up in us, that's totally like natural and normal, and it would be weird to like desensitize ourselves to that. But like if you want to desensitize yourself to snakes and you have an irrational fear of snakes, you can go through exposure. You can go through exposure therapy. You can do exposure yourself. It's obviously like much more it's easier with a guide. But I think it's like that process of understanding that like this person has pulled the moon and the snake towards them. These things also reveal truth, bringing them down. They've shattered the illusions. They've, and this is in the self. This is all in relationship to the self. And I think of that snake too as like understanding our like reptilian like nature. So we know about the like a theory of evolution, and it's one of the things that we don't often think about is that we have the brain of like a reptile and like a frog and a fish or whatever, and then like a mouse, and it's obviously like our brain is not their brains, but we do have a part of our brain that is very similar to that, and that is a part of us that is still perpetuating fear inside of us, because that's like its main way of navigating through the world, is to say like, is the ego essentially now in us, is to say, if I haven't done it before and I don't have any like record of how that could turn out, then like I'm entitled to be fearful of it, and therefore or if I have more bad instances in mind, bad events in mind, or whatever, then of course like I have every right to have that fear. But also I don't have to live in that. I can also go to the other side. Every fearful thought that comes up, there's another positive, I don't like that word positive, but like additive, not positive, but like fearful thoughts are often like destructive. Don't do this, stay away from that, can't have this, those kinds of things. It has to be this way. It's limiting, it's putting conditions on our happiness is the way I kind of like to think about it. And so anytime we can do that and say, well, okay, I thought getting this close to a snake was going to be, out of the question, but here, I went over to my friend's house and let the snake out of the cage, and I stayed in the room with the snake that wasn't in an aquarium for a full 10 minutes. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And then we start to expose ourselves, and we get better and better, and all of a sudden, they're like, I got a snake, and I got my own slice of the moon, and all of a sudden, everything's coming together in a way that, like, we're able to integrate those lessons from the world, but in a new way that we thought we would never care to have the ability to hold snakes, but here we are. We're ready to understand that more. We're ready to understand why people find joy in that. I think it's really the things that we didn't know we were going to find joy in are things we're going to start to find joy in, I think, over the next few days. Things we didn't know we have learned. Hidden little things that have been hidden even from us that are finally coming to the surface and getting integrated in, and we're seeing how those things can reward us too. So that advice is, to look inward, to explore those. When those fears come up, ask them questions. What are you protecting? What are you protecting me from? What are you protecting me from seeing? What are you afraid of happening? I appreciate you trying to protect me, but I'm gonna do this anyways. I've got to be practical about it. I've got to integrate those lessons that I've done, and I can't keep sitting here on the sideline thinking about all that I know and not integrating it and using it to get myself out of here. I've got to get out. I've got to be free. I can't stay a butterfly in a cocoon. That's not the place where I'm meant to be, you know? It's getting really dark. There we go. It's not very much better, but let's draw a few more cards. Spirit. 2 wands. 2 of Wands is like making decisions for the future, discovery. So those things that didn't come out all the way though. So I just wanted to mention that. So I couldn't find clear meaning for that for some reason. Some of these. Interesting. I wrote down like keywords and things that help jog my memory. And sometimes I'm like, I don't see how that fits here. But I have more than one set that I look at. Spirit, can you give us some advice for moving through this next week? How can we overcome or best face these obstacles? How can we overcome the obstacles that we are due to overcome? And how can we best rid ourselves of these limiting beliefs? If there's a particular part to look at, what part is that? The Empress reversed. So it's like this creative energy that maybe is stagnant or depleted or impeded in some way. That's what I would say is that, there's like, what is that? The Venus sign is on here. So perhaps building an altar space to Venus, creating some ritual within our days more often towards Venus, especially if we are trying to like sweeten up our energy. Some people, I've been using personally a yellow candle to sweeten up my energy. 3s deal with like community and connection. Communication again is reiterated. 3s has to do with, how do we like engage in friendship and creative endeavors like as a group process, not just as an individual thing. It's also about perhaps we're like kind of resistant to the idea of like creating our own path of like I showed you all of this, of like forging our own way. Maybe like we have a duty or a calling or a quest in front of us, that's saying that we really need to like birth something new into the world and like move through that. And it's right now we're in the contraction stage, or we're in the like really uncomfortable like 6-month stage where we were like, just get this thing out of me. Like I quit. I'm done. I don't want this anymore. I take it back. I made a mistake. I didn't want this ever. I didn't realize how intense this was going to be. And so it's like kind of like stopping that process in the middle is the sense that I'm getting, that we've kind of stunted our own creative energy possibly. And so how can we like find a way to let creativity flow through us without expecting inspiration first. There's this common misconception, so I think as some of you know that I have worked with kids with art for a long time, and there's this common misconception that in order to get good at drawing, we have to have a thing that we want to draw. I want to draw a picture of this, I want to draw this, you know, like whatever, and I have to practice drawing that until I draw that thing. And the reality is that I think personally having a goal of what you want to draw is the worst way to start out of like trying to be creative, because that's the opposite. Like, that's production, not creativity. And that is something that it can come from creativity. Creative energy can lead to the ability to be productive, creatively productive. But in order for me to get good at drawing this, I need to draw what I'm good at now, and I need to then build on the skills that I do have and build towards the skills that I can tell I need in order to do something like this. I need to have skills for shading, I need to have skills for line work, I need to have skills for portraiture, so I need to understand facial proportions, I need to understand, you know, like how do you look at somebody and how, you know, like the shading and the depth, how do you create depth, you know, this is all done with what looks like graphite, you know. So it's like all these different ways of like looking at something. What I would do is start out with a pencil and start doing a bunch of circles or something. That's a good way, that's a good creative exercise that puts aside the motivation and the outcome and the production and the end of it. It's not about trying to worry about all of the pomp and the, you know, the benefit and the profit that will come from it. It's about creativity for the sake of creativity, and so it's just about pulling out a piece of paper and drawing. And I had this time that this is my story of this process. I draw a lot. Like, I went to school for art. I love painting, I love creating things, and I go through phases where it's very difficult for me to draw. And so I pulled out this picture and I was like drawing, and I was trying to draw from a picture that I've drawn before. So I was like trying to redraw my own artwork. I was like, surely this won't be that hard. And I looked back at it, and it's a totally different medium than what I did the original artwork in. So of course that's the number one thing that makes it harder to replicate, is if it's a completely different medium. Hey Otis. There's a picture of Otis that I was drawing. He's like, are you talking about me? Anyways, it turned out terrible. It turned out looking like hilarious, like laughably terrible. And so hi. He's like, it's time for me to eat. What can I do? Wait. Just wait. But essentially just getting into that process. So like, even if that creativity isn't drawing, which is a great way to do it, I think personally, but this could also be journaling for the sake of journaling, even though it doesn't feel like we're being like really productive at it. Like, we don't feel like we're getting anywhere, we don't feel like we're like doing anything extremely groundbreaking, but still journaling, waking up, doing 3 to 4 pages. I think 3 pages is a good like way to make sure that you push yourself past that freeze point where you're like, my mind is going blank. Write that down. My mind's going blank. My mind is blank and I don't know what to say. And then, you know, and then whatever comes up. And I have a really hard time making myself write things that come up because I'm avoidant in a lot of ways that I would be like, nah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be written down. It's not a big deal. But that's a way that I shrink myself too sometimes, is to say, it's not a big deal. It doesn't need to be written down. Well, if it's not a big deal, then fucking write it down. Pardon my language. But, you know, this is also that, like, if cooking a meal is the sense of creativity that, like, best brings joy, you know, for you, and especially if that's like a way to bring play and communication with loved ones. If you want to get creative with your loved ones, like, imagine that, like, if you're having an argument or a disconnection, you feel despondent in a particular relationship or whatever, and you guys get together and you have a night where you're like, hey, let's do a potluck, let's do, you know, come over here and I want to buy you dinner, or I'm going to bring you lunch over to your workplace because I have the afternoon off, or, you know, like, finding these little ways that we can add playfulness by surprising somebody, by being spontaneous. Those things are playful too. And creativity, bringing that into it, is how can I do something that's special for me and special for you, where I get to use my creative energy, which doesn't have to be making something with my bare hands, but that can be, in my experience, that's the most beneficial way, the most direct way to use that energy. But it can also be coming up with a really interesting and creative idea of how to connect and play and communicate with friends that pushes past these self-limiting beliefs of what we think is going to happen when we try to like be who we really are and like be practical in the world as we kind of move out and go through these next steps. I think this is definitely a sign that's like, you know, like if it's cooking a meal and taking it over to a neighbor and saying, I made this and I wanted to give half of it to you, and I hope you'll enjoy it. And it's just like lightening the load for somebody and doing that service. Like I think that's a good piece of advice for this week. And like it can be, I'm trying to think of some other things that are creative besides journaling and cooking. I mean, I think that's a good start. Nothing else is coming to mind right now. So I think that's all for today, for this week. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll be back to doing the daily tarot pulls on Instagram, and I'm thinking about changing the format. I always do. And I missed out on a few I had drawn for last week, but I have chronic pain issues, and it's just kind of hard sometimes for me to focus on everything that I have going on, and I kind of let that fall by the wayside. But if you ever need a personal tarot reading, I'm also going to start trying to do first Fridays, or maybe second Fridays of the month, or last Fridays of the month, where I offer 5 free tarot readings for the first 5 people that show up to my live. That's something that I need to get into marketing and promoting a little bit better. And there's something else I was thinking of. I'm going to be at a holiday market thing. I think it's a holiday market. It's a market for local businesses, and I'm going to go and read. I'll be doing 10-minute readings for $10, and you should go look. That was so funny of you. You should go look at my website if you're interested in personal readings, whether you can make it to this holiday market thing, or if you want to book an in-person or a phone call or a video call reading with me. I'd really love to hear from you all. I offer readings, video call, pre-recorded video readings, and written email readings. So, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.